Hey everybody, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Welcome back to my channel. So here I am for my favorite video to film. It is my currently inked for the month of February, and this is absolutely one of my favorite videos to film. I love being able to share with you guys what I'm inking up, but also some of the new pens that I've got. But before I get into that, I'm going to actually show you a little bit of my January progress report. So here are the inks that I have for January. And when it came to the rating system, I was actually taking a lot of inspiration from Chris of Chris Sains and also from Simone. And I really like their rating system, but also Tiffany of Carrots and Olives has a really great rating system, which I'm going to actually start using in February. So this is just a quick overview of what I thought of each pen and ink pairing. The first one being the F3 Pens Model 3 Moonlit Rodden in the fine, and it had Ferris wheel press blushing mushroom. Beautiful ink, but the nib and ink pairing, the flow wasn't very great. I really had to agitate the pen and the converter pretty much every day right before using it. So the ink flow wasn't great, but the ink was absolutely beautiful and I loved using that pen. Such a smooth writer. The second pen was the Leonardo Memento Zero Grande 2.0 in Angel Skin with an extra fine, sorry, it's a 14K fine nib, and I used Teranishi Opera Rose, and this was my favorite combination. As you can see, it's got an A++, so the nib is so smooth and wet, and the ink itself is beautiful in wetness, color, and shading. Really beautiful pairing, probably my favorite. The next one is the Pelikan M400 in the white tortoise with an extra fine nib, and I decided to pair that with Pelikan Edelstein Golden Barrel. I wanted something really fun and punchy and sparkly, and Golden Barrel didn't disappoint. It is a little bit tough to read in certain places, but considering how shimmery this is, I didn't actually have any trouble with ink flow at all. So in that respect, it was actually a very good ink and nib pairing. The fourth pen that I had was the Angel Shop Tiffany pen with a fine nib, and it matched perfectly with Diamine Steel Blue. It was actually a very good pairing. The pen itself is a very smooth writer, but a little bit narrow for my grip. The ink flowed really well, and they were both very good matches for each other. But after a little bit of use, it seemed like the ink wasn't going down into the feed as much, so it was almost if I had to let it rest for a bit to let the flow of the ink go down into the feed. The fifth one was my least favorite pairing, to the point where I don't even have the pen anymore. It was the Lamy All-Star Cosmic with a 1.1 stub. Now, this is not to say that I didn't love the pen. I really liked the pen. It was my very first stub nib, but I had already been thinking of selling this pen just because it was no longer one I wanted to reach for. I feel like I had also grown out of this pen. But what really clinched it for me was pairing it with Ferris wheel press Chidori Cherry Blossom. Awful pairing, and I hate saying something so negative on my channel, but it was such a dry pairing. It was dry, too light, there were hard starts. It was just an awful combination. But I thought, is it the pen or is it the ink? So I tried Colorverse Brunch Date in the Lamy All-Star just to check, and it was perfect, absolutely beautiful. So really, I wasn't a big fan of the Ferris wheel press Chidori Cherry Blossom, but it was so fun to paint with, really fun to paint with. The sixth pen from January is my Laban Rosa Lilac, one of my favorite pens, and it has a medium steel, I believe it's a Bach nib that's on there, and I paired it with Colorverse Alpha Pisces. The reason that I paired that is because this nib actually writes quite wet, and I thought that the Alpha Pisces is a little dry, but the two together, really great pairing. The ink flowed really well, such a smooth writer, really great combination. And then the last one is my Sailor Pro Gear in the white rose gold with a medium fine 21K nib, and I paired it with Diamine Amazing Amethyst. I love this purple, and the pen itself is amazing, but somehow on some papers, this combination felt a bit dry, and the nib didn't feel as smooth. I mean, it felt great on the Tomoe River paper, but when I was using it on Rhodia, it wasn't as great. It felt a little dry. So those are, I guess that's my progress report for January. Now, I also wanted to show you, Yes. So at the beginning of 2023, I did a little summary really of like my pen stats. So how many pens I have, how many ink bottles, and how many samples. So based on that, I also did a little January report of what I purchased and what I got rid of or used up. So in terms of pens, I purchased 2 pens. I was gifted 2 pens. The pens that I actually received in this month were, there were 3 pens, and I sold and gave away 2 pens. In terms of ink samples, I finished 14 ink samples. I am very proud of that number. 0 ink purchased and 0 inks swapped or gifted. So I'm actually really proud of that. I'm really trying to get through all of the inks that I have. So in total, ending January, I have 66 ink samples. I didn't count my bottled ink because that didn't change. So actually, I have 38 ink bottles. I still have 38 ink bottles. And then 25 fountain pens with 2 in transit. All right, so let's get to the actual point of this video. The first pen in my lineup for January is my Pelikan M605 in the black tortoise. And this comes with an extra fine gold nib. Really beautiful. I love the designs of this. So this is inked with, how many squares do I put down? This is the thing, I've done this before, and now because this is a new notebook, I'm like, how many squares do I put down? I think that's 3. Yeah. Really beautiful. And this is actually the pen and ink combo that I currently am using for my 5-year journal. And already I'm experiencing what I've experienced the last couple of days, is that the shimmer is making this normally quite wet pen very dry. Hold on. There we go. So just priming it a little bit. There we go. Much better flow. So this is the Pelikan M605 in the black tortoise. And it has an extra fine, I believe it's 14 karat nib. And the ink that is in here is actually Ferris Wheel Press, the Velvet Ballet. And it's got this beautiful shimmer in here. And I wanted a fun, really nice shimmery ink for my ink journal. So this is the ink that I chose for this month, for February, in my 5-year journal. But look at the different shading in here and just that shimmer. Absolutely beautiful. Already though, I'm experiencing some flow issues, but I think it just requires a little bit of a start. So the next pen that I have in my lineup is my Pilot Vanishing Point in the gunmetal gray. And this one, this is one of the samples that I ended up using up. And I am tempted to actually buy just a small 15 ml bottle of this because it is such a pretty purple. So this is my Pilot Vanishing Point. And it currently has a fine 18K nib in there. And the ink that we have in here is Pilot Hiroshizuku Murasaki Shikibu. And I never know if I'm saying that right. But I love this purple. I've surprised myself with how much I have loved purple since starting this hobby. But I do want a bottle of this. Not a huge, not the big glass bottle, not like the big glass bottles, but the smaller 15 ml one. Really, really pretty. The next pen that I have inked up here is my Sailor Pro Gear Slim in Dragon Palace. And this was my first ever Sailor. Now I only have 3, so it's not a, you know, big deal, but I have had thoughts about selling this pen. I have thoughts about selling pens or giving them away pens regularly, but as soon as I picked this up again and inked it up, it's like, nope, you get to stay. So this is my Sailor Pro Gear Slim in the Dragon Palace, and I'm gonna write the actual model because I do have another Sailor Pro Gear Slim and don't want to mix them up. And this has the medium fine nib, and this currently has Sailor Ink Studio 237. Such a fun pink. That's all I can say about it. It's such a fun pink without being garish. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's some pinks that are just punch you in the face pink. This one is, I'm fun without being too much. Can we describe inks like that? There we go. So that is my Sailor Pro Gear Slim in Dragon Palace. The next one that I have inked up, I'm trying to go figure out which order to go in here. This one is my Benu Euphoria in the Ocean Breeze. Like, just, if you haven't seen the video on this yet, just look at all of those sparkles. And this one I currently have inked with, what do I have inked in here? Oh, I remember. The ink flow already on this one is fantastic. This is the great thing I do have to say about Benu. Yes, their pens are incredibly flashy, but there are actually some models that aren't as out there as others. But the nibs are fantastic. They have Schmidt nibs on them. So this is the Benu Euphoria in the Ocean Breeze. I only have one Benu, but I would like to try a Talisman. And this has a fine steel Schmidt nib, and it is such a smooth writer, wet writer as well. And this has Ferris wheel press storied blue. I love this blue. It's almost leaning a bit teal, actually. But very pretty wintry blue. And already smooth writer. Beautiful. So that is my Benu Euphoria in the Ocean Breeze. And I wanted to find something that kind of matched it, and it kind of does. Although the previous one, the Sailor Pro Gear Slim, did not match that ink color. The next pen I have inked up is a newer pen, and it is one of my favorites. This is from On a Whim Woodworks, and this is the Zephyr model, and this is using the Cool Tone primary manipulation resin from Carolina Pen Company, or it's from Jonathan Brooks. But just look at that. Perfect. So it has a medium steel Bach nib, and I had this ground into a stub nib done by Jack Hernandez. He is a nib grinder in Calgary, Alberta, so it's about a 3-hour drive from me, and his turnaround was absolutely fantastic. But I was actually speaking to him, and he said that, oh yeah, I just met up with Doug of Inquiring Minds and Stephen Brown of SBRE Brown, and I'm like, whoa, famous. So this is On a Whim Woodworks, the Cool Tone, ooh, Cool Tone primary manipulation, and it has a medium stub. You know, it would help if I did that properly. And this is inked up with Pilot, Hiroshizuku, Ajisai. And I love the blurple look of this, but if you look closely, can you see the line variation here? So downstroke, broad, and then cross stroke or thin. And I got it in a medium because this actually originally came with a medium nib, and I'm finding that like the 1.1 stubs are just too broad for me, but this one is still a little bit big for my writing, but I absolutely love it in this pen. And this pen just feels so good in the hand. But the two together already are a great combination and a very wet writer. Jack has made this nib a very wet writing nib. So that is my On a Whim Woodworks pen. The next pen is another new one. This is from Casey of Pens by Casey in Australia, and he made this with another Jonathan Brooks blank. This is a primary manipulation. When I say primary manipulation, it basically means that Jonathan uses primary colors and then basically swirls them to create different patterns, and every blank looks completely different. So every pen, even if it says primary manipulation, is different. So for those that don't know, Jonathan Brooks of Carolina Pen Company, they design the blanks, and then the pen makers or the pen turners are the ones that actually shape it into the pen. So they're the ones that create the body and the cap, and then they're the ones that put the housing for the nib and feed in there as well. So this one I also had ground by Jack Hernandez, and like I said, his turnaround was fantastic and he was great to communicate with. Look at this color. So this one is, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see already, Pens by Casey, primary manipulation. And this has a medium architect. I already have a fine architect, which is on my Ranga pen that I got from Peyton Street Pens. So I wanted to try a medium. And the ink in here is a collaboration between Sailor and Tinterias, and it is the Homemade Tortilla. I love the way that this nib makes my writing look both in printing and in cursive, because the downstrokes are fine and the broad strokes, look at how thick they are. Adds such great variation to the writing. And with this ink so far, I'm finding that it goes down light and then it dries this beautiful mustardy yellow. I love that. So that is my pen from Casey in the primary manipulation. The last pen in my lineup is my newest one. It is my Platinum 3776 in Laurel Green. And my husband had actually given me a gift card to a local stationery store, and that is where I purchased this. I actually had a different pen in mind that I wanted to purchase, but in the end I ended up splurging on this one. I always wanted a Platinum 3776, but this is my first Platinum pen. And if you haven't seen my unboxing and review of that yet, I'll try to link it here in the corner. But this is the finest nib that I currently own. Now, correct me if I'm wrong down at the bottom. Is it always Platinum Century 3776 or is it just Platinum 3776? And it has a fine 14 karat nib. And it's definitely toothy, but smooth still. And it has Pilot, Iroshizuku, Taki Sumi. So I wanted a pen that would have black ink in it for this month, and what better than the finest, crispest nib I have. Such a fine, crisp line. I didn't think that I would like this because I was all into the mediums and the really wet nibs, but there is always a place for a very fine, crisp line like on this Platinum. Absolutely beautiful. So there are all of my pens inked for February. What do you guys have inked up for the month of February? I know I get asked this as well. every time I do this video, and I do clean out my pens at the end of the month and start fresh at the beginning of the month. If there's a couple of drops left, like for example, there's still a couple of drops left in my Leonardo, I will use it until the very end because I absolutely love that ink. But there are some pens where there's a couple of drops and I have a full bottle of the ink and I just wash it out. It's not a big deal to me. I know for some people that's a huge deal, but for me, not too much. All right, but that is it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys are inking up for this month. I love hearing what you guys are up to, different ink combinations, different pen combinations, and just what you guys are doing with your fountain pen hobby. Thank you guys so much for watching and have yourselves a great day.